Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's Caffeine for the Soul. And as you may have guessed from the title, it's a very special episode because this is our 500th episode together. And when I began doing these podcasts, I had no idea how long I would keep going, and I still have no idea how long I'm going to keep going. But I thought it would be fun to spend our time together today just going through and sharing what looks differently to me now than it did when I began recording these 500 episodes ago. And in a way, the idea for the episode came from one of my first mentors in the Inside Out Understanding, a woman named Sandy Crott. She came out to visit the house when she was working with me, and she had lunch with my wife and I. And my wife was quite intrigued to find out she'd been sharing this understanding for over 20 years at that time. And she said, well, what do you see differently now to what you did then? And Sandy said, well, it's not really that I see things differently. It's that when I started, I really only had one way of pointing to this, and now I have 500 ways. And for me, it's not quite the same in that I do seem to have quite a few different ways of talking about this. But there are a few things that I see differently now to when I began. So just to begin, in case you're new, it'd be funny if you did start your first listen on our 500th episode, but just in case, to kind of review what I sometimes talk about as the basic course in the Inside Out Understanding. And there are essentially two key pieces and to the basic course. And one is the understanding that we live in the feeling of our thinking, not the feeling of our circumstances. In other words, our experience doesn't come from outside us. It comes from within, hence the inside-out understanding. And it turns out that has an insane number of implications for how we live our lives and how we gum up the works and make things more difficult than they need to be, but also how we can find simplicity and change much more effortlessly than we've been taught. And my first book, The Inside Out Revolution, largely focuses on that aspect of the Inside Out Understanding. Now, my second book, The Space Within, focuses on kind of the other half of the equation. And that's that who we are at core is pure consciousness. Sometimes, depending on who I'm speaking to, I might say, do you know that you're God? Not that you're God, but that you're made of God. You're made of spirit. You're made of life. Sometimes with some people, it's easier to talk about the space of meditation. My second book is called The Space Within. I sometimes talk about it as the space where miracles happen. And those two things, understanding where your experience comes from and understanding the energy that you're made of and that animates you, are actually more than enough to change your life forever. Now, my daughter Clara, when she was in high school, she traveled with me for a bit, and she was sort of doing online school, but she would come along on some of my trainings and just help out. And she asked me once, after we'd been touring all over, we'd been in Europe and we'd been traveling throughout the States, and she said to me, Dad, does anybody else notice that whatever the subject you're talking about, you're pretty much always talking about the same thing? And I was like, yeah, they do, but nobody minds because it's a really good thing. And that really good thing is what I call the Inside Out Understanding, that we're experiencing a thought-created reality, not some sort of fixed external reality. And that we're made of life. We're made of the intelligence of life, the intelligent energy behind all things, whether in form or formless, as the Scottish mystic Sid Banks described it. So that hasn't changed. But the first of the three things that I thought I'd highlight that have changed over the course of 500 episodes are and the first is what I sometimes call the advanced course. So if that's the basic course, the advanced course is no, really, like it really does work this way. That's not a theory. It's not a philosophy. It's not a positive attitude. It's as close as I've gotten to being able to describe the physics behind the human experience. In other words, we could call it the spiritual physics. Like, how does the human experience actually work? And the more you look in this direction, in my experience, the more apparent it is, the more real it gets. And so one of the big shifts for me has just been seeing, oh, this is really how it works. It actually amuses me. And I'm happy to point it out to people that they'll come on courses or hire me as a coach and spend sometimes quite a lot of money by most people's standards to hire me. And then they're surprised that what I'm talking about actually turns out to be true. And there's something kind of funny about that to me. But the more you realize this, the more you see the truth of this for yourself, the more impact it will have in your life. And so that's one of the things. It's just a deepening. Now, the second thing is I've shifted over the years from almost sharing the principles behind the human experience, but also, and then what you should do about this, and what you can do differently in relationships, and what you can do differently around money, and what you can do differently with your health. And while I still will speak to that from time to time in certain ways, I've really learned that having a physics conversation about what life is and how it works, what the mind is and how it works, is almost always more impactful than having an engineering conversation about what to do. And that can be disconcerting for people because people often would come to me as a coach or as a teacher and go, well, tell me what to do and I'll do it. But what I've increasingly seen over the years is that there really aren't that many generic behavioral prescriptions that are going to make a difference for everyone. I remember a coach once saying to me, well, just do what I do. And I was like, well, why would I do that? And he said, well, if I throw a rock through a window, the window will break. So if you throw a rock through a window, the window will break. And I was aware that that was true, but I was also aware that human beings aren't rocks and our lives aren't windows. So one of the things I talk about more and more is that you get to live your life your way. Understanding the physics behind how it works is incredibly helpful. But ultimately, my best advice may not fit for you at all, and your best advice probably wouldn't fit for me at all. But understanding how we're made and how things work will be incredibly helpful to both of us as we find our way in the world. And then the third thing is my first big insight into the insight on understanding the three principles was the realization that there was nothing wrong with me, that I wasn't broken, that in fact, I had never been broken despite the fact that I grew up as a depressed, suicidal teenager and continued to battle with anxiety and depression through my 20s and early 30s. That was not indicative of there being a fundamental problem with me. It was indicative of my not understanding how the system worked and consequently using my mind in a way that was extremely unhelpful and extremely anxiety-producing, and then depression would come in to settle my anxiety, and I didn't understand that either, so then I'd fight the depression, which would create more anxiety, and just keep the whole cycle going. So my first real insight was, oh, there's nothing wrong with anyone. We just all think too much, and we don't really understand the impact of that. But what's changed for me over the years is not that I've decided that some people actually are broken. It's realizing that it's not just that we're not broken. We're freaking glorious. We are magnificent creatures. Now, we're also really messy, so you could say that we're kind of magnificently messy. But fundamentally, who you are is the infinite creative potential of the entire universe in form. You are the divine whole manifesting as the human specific. You are the formless energy and intelligence of life itself in a form that looks and sounds and responds very much like you. And when you start to see just how amazing human beings are, it doesn't make sense to spend all your time trying to just tidy up your humanity. It makes more and more sense, and it seems to appeal to people more and more, to express their divinity, to express their aliveness, to express their creative potential. And my first TED Talk was called "Why Aren't We Awesomer?" And one of the things that I've come to realize is, we are. It's just that sometimes we haven't learned to recognize that, and we haven't learned to live that way. So I hope you've enjoyed the episode. I hope you enjoy the Inside Out Understanding. And if you want to learn more, we've got an online community called the Living from the Inside Out community. And you can join it. It's $10 a month, and it's available to anyone. And you get the chance to actually ask me questions and speak with me, and you get access to tons of videos and old blogs and recordings, and you get discounts on our live program. So if you do want to learn more, go to michaelneill.org and check out the Living from the Inside Out community. Until next time, have fun, learn heaps, happy exploring, and I'll talk with you soon.